All right. So what were we talking about? The Drake equation?
The Drake equation, along with intelligent life in our galaxy and the universe.
Never heard
And
of it. What is
okay,
it?
okay, there's this astronomer or physicist. I think it was astronomer. I forget his first name, but his last name is Drake. He's still
Hmm.
alive. He's in his probably late 80s.
Okay.
He came up with an equation to calculate how many intelligent communicating civilizations there are in the galaxy, meaning those who have our technology or higher, so they can transmit signals, radio signals, or what other type of TV signals, and receive
So
them.
it's like a mathematical
Yes, and
equation.
yeah. Now, you can find it online. Just look up Drake equation calculator. It's kind of fun. And the first part is star formation in the galaxy.
All right.
And I was surprised that not that many new stars are created per year in the galaxy, because the galaxy has anywhere from 100 billion to 400 billion stars. Now, according to a lot of the physicists and cosmologists, maybe 1 to 3 stars are created per year in the galaxy.
One in
So,
one galaxy.
yes, in our galaxy. I don't know about other galaxies, but so the first part of the Drake equation is how many stars per year are created. So you put in 3, let's say, okay?
Uh-huh.
Of those stars, no, of all the stars in the galaxy, not just those 3, but all the stars, how many have planets?
Hmm.
I estimate about at least 80%,
Okay.
because it seems like every star they've been monitoring for planets, they find some sort of planet around it.
Which is, I mean, if you just look at our galaxy, there's all kinds of or moons at least
Yes,
around many of the planets, as far as I understand. They're almost like mini planets.
that's right. And uh, the planets are like mostly gas giants,
Yeah.
and so far they've discovered over 4,000 planets. And the way they do that is they detect the gravitational pull of the planet on the sun, so there's a bit of a wobble.
Hmm.
And also, when a planet crosses crosses across, like when it passes across the star, there's
Hmm.
a bit of a dimming. It's so minuscule, like
Hmm.
they can calculate it.
They can measure it.
Yeah, so with the wobble and the dimming factors, they can figure out how big is a planet, what's it made out of, and
Yeah.
how far it is away.
Yeah.
Okay, that being said, so with that, originally Drake thought that there's only like maybe 50% of the stars in the galaxy have planets, but I think it's probably higher. Like some
Yeah.
scientists think it's higher, than it's 80, maybe even 100%.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's say you put in 80% in the Drake equation, like in your calculations. And then of those planets, how many have Earth-like stars? Earth-like planets, as in rocky core or a
Hmm.
rocky planet that could be, um, what do you call it? Could be habitable.
Yeah.
Like that have the ingredients for life. Like
Yep.
it's got an atmosphere, it's got oceans or water.
It's got the right
And
ingredients and potential.
yeah, potential. So according to the formula, like originally he put in 2 planets per solar system or per star,
Yeah.
that are could be like Earth-like. I think it's lower. I put in 1/3, like 0.33. How do I put this? Uh, for every 3 solar system, there's 1 planet that could be habitable.
Hmm.
Okay, so when you go to that, you put that down. Then you put down of those planets that may be habitable, what percentage actually has life developed.
Hmm.
He once again, Drake was hopeful that it said if a planet could be habitable, it most likely is. So he
Hmm.
says probably 100%. I think it's probably 50%, and some scientists have revised it to less than 50%. Okay,
Hmm.
so you put in that factor, and then of those planets that are habitable or have life develop, what percentage have intelligent life? So you put in, okay, let's say 25%. Then of those planets that have intelligent life, what percentage has our technology or higher?
Or higher.
Yeah, so let's say another 25%. And then Of those, the factor is, what is the average length of an intelligent civilization? That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like, is it 1,000 years? Is it a million
Yeah, yeah,
years?
yeah,
Is it
yeah. Well,
100,000 years?
you're talking about time now, and
Yeah.
and you also mentioned about this other thing. I just sort of interrupt, but I think it's worth mentioning that this theory, I don't even know if it's a theory or if it's an actual fact and accepted as such, where the universe is expanding and the
Yes.
amount of space between all the galaxies is expanding, which is creating a certain effect.
Yes.
Talk about that later if
Sure.
and when you're done
I'm
finishing.
almost done. I'm
No, it's
almost,
cool. It's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
It's fascinating in many, many ways. And the big question on top of everything you're talking about is, all right, where does time fit in? And of course, we've talked about Planck time before. We should touch on
Yeah.
that for a bit, which is a really weird thing. But but time in general, is it infinite? Is it like we know it as humans as a certain section of, we only get to live it for a certain amount of time? But in the grand scheme of things and how it plays out with what you're talking about, we're talking about life on other planets,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
So what if there was a measurement of time that was like a trillion times a trillion times a trillion times to the power of a trillion 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 in the past? What about then? Can we measure that? Can we go back to then or into the future where we can, have a different perspective on all of these things, whether or not life might have existed and it might have just died out a trillion gazillion years ago? Maybe it exists right now, but we'll never know it's there, and they'll never know we're here because of the limitations of this expanding universe, which I hope you explain. Actually, why don't you explain that?
Sure. Okay, but back to the tail end of the Drake equation.
Yep.
When they say how long does a civilization exist, they mean how long with the technology they have that is transmittable. So, for instance, humans on Earth have been around for a few million years, back to the caveman days, or even before that, just when they got out of the trees. But we've only been able to transmit signals probably slightly over 100 years. I don't know when the radio was invented. I'm assuming it was in the early 20s or late teens of last century.
You might say the mid 1800s because they had telegraph.
Okay.
Let's consider that.
Sure.
I may be wrong, but I'm going with that.
Okay.
They had telegraph cables, and although it was crude, and they had to do Morse code.
Sure.
It was electronic.
But so you put in variables. So I've played with this Drake equation calculator several times just for my own entertainment, and the results are not that great.
No.
Like, okay, if your average civilization lives 1,000,000 years, usually it's around under 50,000 intelligent civilizations in our galaxy. That's if most civilizations live 1,000,000 years.
In our galaxy.
In our galaxy, yes.
And there's almost an infinite amount of galaxies out there, according
Well,
to
they figure there's at least 100 billion galaxies that we know. So even if there's only one intelligent civilization per galaxy, that means there's 100 billion intelligent civilizations, but we may never know about them because to the space expanding, it's the space is expanding faster, and I don't know what the timeline, but probably several billions of years. The light that leaves a galaxy won't be able to reach us because the space between our galaxy and theirs is getting faster and faster. So maybe in, let's say, 1 trillion years, there might be some sentient civilization of people that have souls and are like us, and they finally develop telescopes in that. And when they look out, they're just going to see what's in their galaxy. They won't be able to see that there's other galaxies. So their knowledge of the universe is like, they, in all honesty, will think, well, this is it. This is the universe. They won't know about the other galaxies.
No.
So that kind of freaks me out. And actually, Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about this. And there's a video on YouTube about what keeps Neil deGrasse Tyson up at night. And it's that topic, So just to close on the Drake equation, I think this was on the Weather Network or on a few other news sites like CTV website or whatever, or CBC, is that a bunch of scientists figure there's only 36 intelligent civilizations in our galaxy. And they're on the average of about
Mm-hmm.
17,000 light years between, or 17 million light years between each galaxy.
That,
Sorry, between each star system.
that's a big number to me. I'm
Yeah.
like, whether or not it's provable or not, who knows?
Yeah.
But if that's a number that is almost accepted scientifically, or maybe not, I don't know. But I think that's a big number. That's
36.
fascinating if it's
Yeah.
true. They're basically saying there's some form of intelligent life out there
Yeah.
in our little galaxy. And there's a lot of galaxies out there.
There are,
then,
and it's amazing.
Then there's the whole time thing. So imagine that there's a civilization from a long, long time ago, and all the data and information from our little planet is just reaching them.
Right.
But they're looking at us into the past. But we're no longer existing by the time they get it.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Or we get their
Crazy.
we get their signal.
Yeah.
And let's say the signal, I forget, Michael Gaudier, I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
He does all these cosmology YouTube videos. And he talks about what are 10 messages from space you don't want to receive.
All right.
And one of them is, please help us. So what if we get a distress call from a civilization that, let's say, is 100,000 light years away?
Yeah.
And we finally get it, and the distress signal shows them having some nuclear war or catastrophe that's going to wipe them out, and they're looking for assistance from other people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think after 100,000 years, they were either saved or not. So,
yeah, not much we can do.
That's
but it's
right.
an interesting concept.
Yes.
It's all fascinating. I hated math in high school, and I refused to take it. So I took commercial math, which was bank teller math. I was the only guy in the class. It was all girls. But I needed to get my credit in order to get my diploma. I could not understand why they were adding letters and numbers together. It never clicked with me. Calculus, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I find this stuff endlessly fascinating. And I also like watching a lot of videos on physics. This is a lot of physics, and something you mentioned the other day, which is kind of in the same realm. We got into the topic of Planck time.
Yes.
So tell me what you know about Planck time.
Okay. What I understand of Planck time is that's the shortest amount of time there is that has any meaning. I one time had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was saying, well, how far can you keep dividing time? Like 1 second, a billionth of a second, a trillionth of a second. And Planck time is actually 10 to the minus 43 seconds.
That's what I wrote down.
Yes.
I figured it out by myself, by the way.
And what that denotes, or what the 10 to the minus 43 seconds is the length of time it takes for light to travel one Planck length. And a Planck length is, I think, I'm probably wrong in my calculations, or from what I remember, is Planck length is like 10 to the minus 20 times smaller than a proton.
Yeah.
It's like really small.
Yeah, you're close.
And I think that Planck length is the smallest distance that anything having to do with physics, like gravity or quantum mechanics or whatever, works. And before that, nothing works. Yeah. And one theory is that Planck time is at 10 to the minus 43 seconds. That's when the Big Bang started. Anything before that didn't exist and is meaningless.
Yeah.
That's my knowledge of Planck time. I probably don't know it all, but
Yeah. It blows me away that in the last 200 years, I'm going to go with 200 years in case somebody started thinking about it way back, like going back to, his name escapes me, before Einstein. He discovered gravity. What the hell is his name?
Newton, Sir Isaac Newton.
Yeah. And, it was a long time ago. But it blows me away that these people you started thinking this way and coming up with these measurements and concepts and ideas. And a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it is theoretical. Like you talk about it being meaningless, and it's beyond the brightest minds around today to be able to conceptualize what is past that time. They can measure it mathematically, I believe, but beyond a certain level, I think, I don't know where it is, but somewhere in there, it's all theory, and then beyond that, it's like what you had just said. It makes no sense, and they can't measure it in the Big Bang and all that stuff. So, but apply that to what we were talking about a minute ago, where you talk about other civilizations, and if will they be able to see us or not? Right? Remember, if the universe is expanding, they will not be.
Right.
They won't be able to measure. But if they can conceptualize it this way, they can at least create a theory that if they're advanced to that level. So it's pretty crazy. It's pretty insane when you think about all this stuff. When you think about Planck time and quantum physics and Planck measurement, what does it mean?
And Max Planck was a physicist or some science. I think he was a physicist. He's the one who came up with the Planck time.
Yeah.
I think he died maybe in the 1940s or 30s. I could be wrong, but
it's mind-boggling.
One last thing about Planck time I would like to say. Okay, here's like, what is the present? The moment you think of the present, it's gone. Like you're past it. So in my own personal definition, the present is Planck time. Because you can't get any smaller than Planck time. So like, is the present 1 second? Not really, because half a second ago, could have that been the present,
Or 10 to the power of minus 43 ago.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
How many of those are we experiencing every second of every day of every minute of every year of our lives?
A few years ago, I read about in the Toronto, I think it was in the Toronto Star Globe and Mail, they're talking about how much is $1 billion, and they compared it to, well, how much is 1 billion seconds? And 1 billion seconds is roughly 31.7 years. And I figured out my birthday. I figured out my age. I'm roughly 1.9 billion seconds old.
Oh, nice.
I'm a bit of a nerd, so when I get bored, I calculate stuff, and
Here's a question for you.
Sure.
And this was presented, I remember, in a workshop decades ago, and I was mind blown when I heard this. It was like, how many? You got to just whatever comes to your mind. You might know the answer, but if you don't know the answer, it's more interesting. How many days does the average person live for? Boom, go.
Oh God.
Don't think too hard.
I'd say 40,000.
Okay, it's 25.
Oh, okay.
And the reason this was brought up was to make it, and everybody had this huge number.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, you're not around as long as you think you are, so make every day count.
True.
That was the idea behind that.
Like 10 years would be 3,650.
Something like that.
Days.
Whatever the math is, but it was a surprisingly low number. So surprisingly low number. In the grand scheme of things, you got to ask yourself what matters and what doesn't matter, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Today's day and age where we have so much bullshit going on and outrage.
Oh my God.
Outrage culture. You mentioned that.
Yes.
Outrage culture. Let's talk about that.
Okay. I just think today people are offended at the drop of a hat. Like,
why?
I
does it scratch? Are you baffled and you sort of hear somebody complain and you're like, are you completely baffled as to where they're coming from?
I think one of the things is 20, 30 or years ago, or even when I was in school, growing up in the 70s, I was in high school. There was a lot of politically correct stuff that was racist and homophobic and just downright nasty. And I'm sure a lot of people were offended.
Yeah.
And there was nobody heard of putting up ramps for handicapped people, or accommodating people with certain disabilities, or when I was in grade school, people who had, looking back, they had obviously had learning disabilities, but they were like classed as stupid or lazy, and they still had the strap back then. So these poor people like might have dyslexia or something, and they're having a hard time learning. That's a bona fide learning disability, but you got the teacher with the strap saying, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
So I think people started getting an awareness of all these injustices, and they wanted to correct them.
Uh-huh.
So I think the motives behind even affirmative action, which I don't agree with, but I can see the motives behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe a lot of companies aren't hiring minorities because they don't want to hire minorities.
Mm-hmm.
So let's give these people a hand. But the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished.
Uh-huh.
It's like, okay, so people start with the best of intentions, and then it gets corrupted somehow. It gets exaggerated where there's some words you can't say anymore because they're politically incorrect, and you might offend somebody. And I'm thinking, what?
Yeah. You might get triggered.
Yes. And the whole trigger thing is just ridiculous. I think with triggering, that's where stoicism should come in. Because back in my parents came from the old country, and I'm sure they had some real hardships and judgments towards them, and probably weren't treated the best. But they stuck it out. They just plowed right through and did what they had to do. And I think as a society, we need to develop stoicism. What's really bad, and what's just you can let it go.
Yeah.
And most people are so sensitive, and they think they're entitled. And
that's stoicism is a great place to be at and or to aspire and to apply if you're able to. And I think we're going back to the Stoics, which is the ancient Greek philosophers.
Okay.
Right. And they had this mindset of pick up, this is a figure of speech, pick up your cross and just carry it up the mountain, bear your load. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. And it's all about responsibilities. And, I've heard it said this way. People are more obsessed these days with rights over responsibility, and it's backwards. You really got to shoot for responsibility first, and from that you can develop a stoic attitude. And I think that if you're stuck in outrage, you're in a very childish, undeveloped, this is going to sound cruel, but I think it's true, you're in an undeveloped state of mind. And you could look at many reasons why this is what it is. I mean, it's crazy. I'm completely baffled as to what's going on culturally in the world, especially North America. But Jonathan Haidt, Jonathan Haidt?
No.
He's a New York professor, University of New York or something like that. He's a psychology prof. He's got I think a TED Talk and other talks on YouTube. Really good. He wrote a book with his other guy called The Coddling of the American Mind. How good intentions and bad ideas are setting up a generation for failure. So, and when you talk about failure, you could define that as many things. And I think that it's got the potential to go down the road of Marxism. People who kind of can see it for what it is, recognize you can compare to what's happened. And again, Jordan Peterson talks about this, and he's not talking about it. It's not like there's anything new. Alexander Solzhenitsyn talked about it when he wrote his book, The Gulag Archipelago, back in 1970 or 71 or something like that, which blew the illusion of socialism and communism being a good thing. Because up until that point, many people thought it was a virtuous way of being. But when you look back at the history of it, and there's a lot of similarities, although back then it started from the Russian Revolution, which came about because of a lot of stupid decisions the monarchy made a lot of really bad moves, and it created the environment. And then there was the war, and the Germans I think Lenin, they gave him passage. They saw this revolution going on, and they gave him passage on a train. They said, let's get this guy so that we could set up the kind of like add some fuel to the fire, and there'll be a revolution, and that way we'll get the Russians off our back, and that way we don't have to fight the Russians and the Allies on the Western Front, which was a strategy that worked out in their benefit. And so anyways, my point being that they had this big revolution, and it was all a result of some really shitty situations that were going on, which led to communism in the 20s, which led to the gulags and the Ukraine situation, the famine, millions and millions and millions of people dying. And I say all this, it sounds kind of weird, but it's really, in many, many ways, what happens when political correctness, we're talking about political correctness
Yeah.
here, because that's the main voice of outrage. You can't even hashtag something as silly as all lives matter without losing your job. And that's cancel culture, which is part of the outrage. So it's almost like history repeats itself over and over again. You got a lot of people who are not happy for whatever reason. And the reasons they're not happy nowadays, I think, is completely different than why they were not happy pre-World War I, which led to the Russian Revolution, which is, you can blame it on the monarchy back then. And by the way, there's a really good series on Netflix about that monarchy. It's a 4-part series or 5-part series. It's really good. And it explains everything. If you like history, which I do.
What's it called?
I forget, but it's not hard to find. Who was the king back then? Him and his wife were really good friends with Rasputin.
Oh, was that Tsar Nicholas? I don't know if it was or
The
not.
czars. I think that's the
The
title.
only czar I know,
Yeah.
the only name I know that belongs to the word czar is Nicholas. So I don't know if that was
Yeah.
him or not.
But anyways, it was all that time period. And, the big warning is we see it coming out now. And people don't see it. Now, tell me what you think of the theories that are being bounced about right now as to why there's this coddling of the American mind. Now, I've heard Jonathan Haidt speak, and I've not read his book, but I kind of know his core tenets, his core ideas. And one of many is besides the fact that we've raised a bunch of soft children, we've coddled them. But one thing he's brought up is that there's this corporate daycare thing where kids are just dropped off in daycare while their moms are off to work. Not a criticism of that. I'm just trying to explain what happened. And you have these large daycares where children are largely, for the most part, influenced by and raised by people running the daycare. So you might have 20, 30 kids, and you have a couple of adults, maybe 3 adults in charge. And they got a workload and a half to manage all these kids. So if you have a problem, if you're a child, you just start, complaining. And it's like, you can overlap that against any institution, education, government. Governments are so inefficient, all the bureaucracy. So if you have a problem, you just complain to the higher ups. And if you don't like what's going on, you just complain. And it's evolved from that to, well, we're not just going to complain, we're going to ruin your life. We're going to cancel you. You're going to lose your job because ideologically we don't agree with you, because we don't agree with you, because what you're saying is hurtful, and I'm triggered, I'm offended, and I'm outraged. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does actually. And sort of in the same topic. Okay, so here's a scenario. Diversity training or sexism or anti-harassment training. Some places, I guess, when you go to work, you're required to take a diversity class, how to deal with minorities, or how to deal with the opposite sex, what's acceptable. Now, my first reaction is, I'm a good guy. I don't think I'm racist. I don't need to take this training. I shouldn't have to. And I'm not going to.
Henry, apparently you're racist and you don't know it.
Okay. Well,
apparently there's that.
Everybody's got preconceived notions to a certain degree, but so I'm thinking, okay, so that's my outrage. I'm outraged that the outrage culture is wanting me to take diversity training. And I figure I shouldn't have to. I should be like, obviously, if I'm incompetent on my job, I shouldn't be there. That's a thing. But I'm thinking, What would happen if I were to take a job and they say, okay, you have to take this diversity class?
Mm.
Now, I would probably take it because I would need the job. And then I
Yeah.
would probably feel bad about me not standing up for myself, thinking, oh, I got to take this, but I don't think I should have to. So I'm kind of going against my own values. So it's like, what do you do? Like,
What choice do you have, though?
yeah, it's like, should I just be, I'm going to stand up for myself and tell them, the hell with you. I'm not taking diversity training because I am not a racist and I know what to do.
Yeah.
Then obviously they won't hire you.
No.
And then you're stuck unemployed, you know?
Yeah. So you got to
So
play the game, and
yeah, it's like a game.
that's
I
exactly what
hate it.
happened in the
I
20s
hate it. Yeah.
in Soviet Union and in the Ukraine. Like if you had a house, a barn, a farm, and
Yeah.
if you had a story and a half, uh, the mob would come along and kill you or send you off into the forest to die and take your house because you had a larger house
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
farmhouse than everybody else. So we were after equality. So, I mean, basically, I bring that up, and we're talking about, in many ways, two different things here because you're talking about somebody imposing this ideology based on something that's goes against your core principles, your beliefs, your why are they doing it? I mean, it's really, in my opinion, really simple. It's power.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I
It
can see
comes
that.
to that. So when you have this this principle, like if you have 40 hours a week, but you only have 20 hours of work, really realistically, the other 20 will fill up automatically. There's an actual term for that. I can't remember what it is, but it's almost a form of measurement, and it'll fill up for the most part with a lot of bureaucracy, possibly a lot of what you're talking about, so that people spend inordinate amounts of time trying to defend what position they have of power. And then it evolves, I want to say devolves, to the level where they're going to use it to force a new set of rules and a new set of laws on the rest of society, including you, so that they can run things their way. It's about power. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. And, you know, the old power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Yep. Well, what about these kids I was telling you about? You got a daycare, a bunch of 7, 8 year
Yeah.
olds, 10 year olds, and how many of them are going to start manipulating the system because they're children and they can't really think clear, and they really don't know any better because they haven't been really taught the proper manners, and you're really talking about common sense, and perhaps a lot of them are in a one parent home, and I'm not trying to diss a one parent home, but there's just something that's sort of, there's a bit of a vacuum in their lives, and they're learning to survive by manipulating and gaming the system. So as a child, they cry, they whine, they have a tantrum, and then they grow up as teenagers and they're still that way and into adulthood. I think what I just described is a lot of what we see going on nowadays, and in large part makes the base of the outrage culture. Right or wrong? Discuss.
Another thing I think might be part of it is that everybody in their life has probably been screwed at least once, screwed over by somebody or something or some institution or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's a residual anger where I want justice. I need some sort of justice because on a personal level, I was screwed by somebody. So therefore, somebody has to pay. So they're really,
So revenge.
anything that just triggers them, which is might even be a little bit similar to what they went through, may not even be directed towards them, and they get triggered and think, "Oh, I got to do something about it." And
Yeah.
another thing I think is a lot of people need a sense of belonging. Um, Back, I guess, in the old days, I don't know how many years ago, but you've had like lots of uncles and aunts and grandparents, and you kind of had a community of people you could rely on.
Yeah.
You had lots of siblings. You belong to a church or you belong to something else. And now the families are getting smaller. You don't get too many big families.
No.
and people are so separated from each other, and
Yeah.
it's like they're craving to belong to something,
Yeah.
and it's better than getting a cause. It's kind of like, let's say you get a lot of outlaw motorcycle gangs have war veterans, guys who got back from Vietnam or even Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
They come back and they feel disenfranchised. Not all of them, but they figure, well, I got to belong to something, so they join a motorcycle gang. Or
Yeah.
same thing with guys growing up in a ghetto. They don't have a father, or else they're very poor, and they join a gang because they want to belong to something.
Well,
And
a gang is their tribe, especially
that's
for,
right. So I think a lot of these social justice warriors, they like the fact that they have a purpose. To them, it's a purpose. It gives them meaning and purpose that,
yeah.
oh, I'm belonging to a cause which will better society, but they haven't got too much critical thinking yet because they're
They're
young.
they're really unevolved.
Yes.
They haven't had true struggle. Just
And I think they're being manipulated by the academics and people
oh
in,
yeah.
yeah,
This is
they're
the number one criticism is the
yeah,
universities and colleges and
yeah,
how they're pandering to this.
that's right. So
By the way, one theory is that these large institutions look at each student as a it's got an investment value to it. So
right, okay, yeah,
each one is worth a lot of money to them,
yes,
so they don't want to lose them.
right,
So
right.
they give in, and they give into the demands, irrational or not irrational.
And I remember talking to a few people, not recently, but I remember quite a while ago, more than 10 years ago or so. I knew a few people that went back to school, went back to university as mature adults.
Mm-hmm.
And they're telling me it's a game because if you disagree with the professor and you write a thesis which goes against what they think, you
Mm-hmm.
don't pass. So you got to kind of corrupt yourself to get the degree.
All right.
Like my way of thinking is, if you can back up your points, no matter how unpleasant your thesis is about or outrageous, but if you can make some good points and back it up with facts and
Yeah.
statistics or whatever, go for it. Like, that's the purpose of education. You should be able to think for yourself and,
Yeah.
defend your own arguments.
You'd think.
Yeah, but a lot of these professors are like, no, it's my way or the highway. Like, no, you're thinking wrong. Wrong think. Like,
Well, let's talk about the professors and their role, other than the fact that they might be also motivated, and universities might be motivated by the fact that they look at each student as with a dollar symbol beside them.
okay,
Let's take
yeah,
that aside and look at what you're talking about. Let's look at, let's put them in a category. We'll call them the intellectuals.
okay,
All right. And I'm using that term because yesterday I watched a 1 hour interview from the Hoover Institute with Thomas Sowell. I think it was from 2014. You know Thomas Sowell?
no.
Really
Oh,
good.
a black guy.
He's a black dude.
Okay, yeah,
He's written well over 20, 25
okay,
books. He's got his doctorate and is smart as a whip. He used to be a hardcore Marxist when he was young,
okay,
and he completely flipped, and he went to he's got conservative values now, and he explains everything why. And he's very critical he's very, very, very smart. But this one discussion was to do with his latest book, which he reprinted. He revised one of his big books and brought it up to date, and it's all got to do with the intellectuals. And I remember reading a book back in the 80s. It was all about how societies and civilizations are led by three core types of people. There's your intellectuals, there's your spiritual leaders, and then there's your warriors. And society evolves from one to the next, and it just recycles through that. And when the intellectuals take over, and this is what Thomas Sowell was talking about, they really, in the end, don't know what they're talking about.
yeah,
They have nothing but ideas. And when you talk about ideas, which are not really bad, but it develops into an ideology which takes over. And especially if you have a situation like I described earlier, where you have 20 hours of work and you have a 40-hour time period, you're going to fill in that extra 20 hours with new rules, new laws, new ways to manipulate so that you can hang on to your ideas and implement them. And, the ego probably plays a big role in all that, and you develop and maintain power.
Yeah, that can apply to anything like the church, the
Church too.
Vatican.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
every big institution has their own way of thinking, and
But it gets out of balance. When it gets
yeah,
out of balance, that's when it's bad. And I think
yeah,
that's what we're noticing now with outrage culture in
yeah.
universities and colleges are a key ally to this.
Well, look at Ben Mulrooney. That
Right.
scenario. Jessica, his wife. I don't know what she did, but she, I guess, offended some people or offended someone on Twitter or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
then she apologized profusely. Probably was insincere. I'm assuming. I'm being judgmental here. And
Yeah.
then Ben, in a show of total virtue signaling,
Right.
decided to resign his post. I guess he
So
was
he's self-canceled.
yes, and then he hopes that somebody of color takes his position.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I just watched before this podcast here. I watched two black guys talking about that,
Uh-huh.
and they're saying they're basically scoffing at Ben Mulroney, thinking he's virtue signaling.
Yeah.
He's trying to tell people how woke he is,
Uh-huh.
and nobody wants to be a token hiree. The person who gets hired just because they're like,
Well, no, wait a minute. Wait, according to them, nobody wants
yeah,
to be,
yeah,
but I
but
think there are a lot of people that want to
okay,
be, and they
yeah,
see
but they're
beyond that.
they were seeing they're saying what he should have done was stay in the job and hold conversations about racism and that. Don't
Yeah.
make a big drama out of it. Oh, I'm going to quit.
Who were these guys?
I don't know. I'll send you the link.
All right.
There's so many YouTube guys, but
Yeah. You got a lot of black, smart. They don't buy into a lot of this outrage,
yeah, yeah,
and I follow a few of them on YouTube. And Thomas Sowell is one of them. Although Thomas Sowell's like almost 90 years old now, but
yeah,
what a freaking genius!
yeah.
But you know, you're the way what you're talking about in that example. It sounds to me, is he? What does he do, anyways? This Ben
He was the
Mulroney.
host of E Talk, and I
Okay,
think a TV show, and I think he's part of a news program as
he's
well.
Canadian, right?
Yeah, he's the son of Brian Mulroney.
So is he only on Canadian TV, or is he on American TV
He's
as
just
well?
on Canadian. He's on the CTV
Okay.
network.
Do you
So
think it sounds to me like he's just trying to save his ass?
maybe I don't know, but in my opinion, I'm thinking what his wife did is her responsibility. Like
Yeah.
he should have said it's got nothing to do with me. It's my wife. If you have any issues with that, talk to her.
Right.
And he just never should have brought it. He should have just kept continuing with his show. Maybe bring up the topics of racism and discuss it on a level where his part in fighting racism, he could probably
Mm-hmm.
pursue that in this capacity as a host. It's like
Yeah.
working within the system to change it.
Yeah. But here's what I got to say about that, and I agree. It makes a lot of sense. But you can't bring these positions and arguments to the crowd. The mob doesn't see that.
Nuts. Yeah.
They only see one thing and one thing only. This
Yeah.
is what I'm seeing.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. You can use as much rationale and logic as you want. They're never going to go, oh, yeah, you're right. It's insanity. It's literally insanity the way I see it. And they only want one thing and one thing only, and that's destruction in order to achieve their end game, which is some sort of weird status and to do with some position of power. You know what I mean? Like what you're saying as an example makes a lot of sense, but they're never going to do that. They might have 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But the outrage mob, and that's what we're talking about here, is the outrage mob. They've devolved to this level of I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like group thing. It's like a hive mind. There's a term called hive mind where
Yep.
people, I don't totally understand it, but people belong to a hive and a collective. It sounds very dark, 1984-ish.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, it's scary. Like, oh my God, you can't even speak the truth anymore, or else you get criticized for whatever.
There's a book. There was a book that was written about this. The guy was a guy who worked on the docks. He was not I think it's Eric Hoffer, The True Believer. He wrote the book called The True Believer. He died in 1983. I'm just found him I remember reading this book years ago. Yeah. I don't even think he was educated. Anyways, you're talking about that. The True Believer is a good book to read, and where and this guy wrote this book decades and decades and decades ago, and he talks about what influences people to that degree where they start to follow one another, and 1984 and all of these other similar situations. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy times. It's like history's repeating itself.
So what do you do in the meantime? Keep your head low.
You know,
Ooh.
that's a good question. What do you do? Like, do you stick your neck out? Some people are able to. Some people have real thick skins. Some people,
Don't get a job at the government if
you
you do
know,
play the game.
yeah. I mean, I feel sorry for people with families and their livelihoods. They need to
Yeah.
keep their jobs.
Okay. I think there's a ray of sunshine in all this.
Okay.
Okay. What you were talking about is stuff we see pushed through, but underneath it all, we don't see well, let's call it the silent majority. Maybe they're a minority. I don't know. Maybe they're somewhere in the middle. But, I see a lot of families in my life, being professionally a photographer and all that. So I'm dealing on a retail business basis with people. And I see a lot of them, and a lot of them seem to be they're just really good people. They're
Yeah.
not like what we're describing here. And I'm thinking that it might be a smaller percentage than what we may seem to think exists. And it's really, possibly like when you look at the BLM movement and all the riots, possibly there's a lot of money also being thrown at them, which allows them to organize at a much higher level. But it's really, in the end, a smaller percentage, maybe. So there could potentially be that. And there's a lot more balance, discipline, maturity, stoicism. But it doesn't get acted out. The stuff that gets acted out is the bullshit you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Does that make any
No, it
sense?
does. Yeah.
Outrage culture could be a manifestation that has got a much bigger voice, makes a lot louder noise than what is just normal, everyday living. I don't know. It's crazy. First time I became aware of this was in, I think, 2015. That university down in not Brock University, Brock's down in St. Catharines. Waterloo, there's two universities. There's Waterloo and what's the other one?
I was going to Wilfrid Laurier, maybe.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So let me tell you this story.
I think I know who you're talking about.
The first time I've ever seen anything like the cancel culture or outrage culture. So there was it was called the Gravitas Cafe, I believe. And there was a guy running the Gravitas Cafe, and I think he had a contract with the university. I think he paid rent, and he ran his cafe. And he always had a hard time finding part-time students, especially, I think, November, December, because for whatever reason. But so he put an ad out on Facebook, and it was a really funny ad. You can go find it if you Google it. Just Google Gravitas Cafe, Wilfrid Laurier. And it was written about on national news and newspapers. But I was shocked when this happened. So he wrote this really funny post looking for part-time help. And the way he wrote it, he said, everyone's welcome. I don't care if you have, if you're a hipster, if you have a man bun, if you have this, that. And it was really well written, but he used the word slave. He said, I want somebody who wants to be a part-time slave at my cafe. Because he used the word slave, the student union, which is like a paid gig run by all these diversity experts, fired him that day. They got rid of him. He had to leave by a security guard. They hauled him out. God. His life was over for using the word slave. Contextually speaking, so innocent, but so funny. And by the way, he did get a lot of people responding to the ad, saying, yeah, I'll come and work. I'm looking for a job. So the ad kind of worked. But the fact that they canceled him for using the word slave, that offended me so much. Nowadays, there's probably much worse of that going on. I'm at the point now where I'm like, whatever. I just can't believe it's happening, and I'm not surprised anymore. It doesn't surprise me. It's insane. Slave. You got to watch everything you say.
I know. Actually, the story you told wasn't the one I was thinking of, but
Which one were you thinking about?
This young woman who was a student, and I think she did a presentation,
To her
and she
class
had
on
a clip,
communications.
and she had a clip from Jordan Peterson and
Lindsay. Well, it wasn't a clip by
Lindsay
Jordan.
Shepherd. Lindsay Shepherd, yeah.
It was a TVO replay of a conversation that was going on
Okay,
the use of gender pronouns.
right.
It was on TVO, which is a provincial.
Public access type TV
Yeah,
station.
and it was a smart discussion. I haven't seen it, but from what I read and heard, it was a pretty good. And yeah, okay, explain it.
Well, from what I know is she showed that clip in her presentation, and she got into trouble because
it is offensive.
yeah, and they called her into all these I guess higher ups in the university called her in, and I guess they tried to shame her into what are you doing? This is offensive, blah blah blah.
They were triggered.
She had her cell phone, and she videotaped or recorded the conversation.
She did.
Then it made national media.
It was crazy.
And these idiots ended up looking really bad. I don't know if they apologized to her or not, but
probably not.
They may have threatened her or something.
Nothing changes. None of this stuff changes anything, though. This whole thing's got enough momentum that it's got to play itself out, I think.
Yeah. And you know what I'm kind of afraid of is there should be pushback to all this. I agree. But I'm afraid, what if the pushback is just as bad as what's happening? Like, let's say, for instance, I can understand, when people say all lives matter.
Yeah.
I can understand why people are upset about that, because what you're doing is you're minimizing what Black Lives Matter is about in a way.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of saying, all lives matter. Well, yeah, all lives do matter. And I can see that, I can see how a person who truly believes that there's all this stuff going on, and I believe, the police are, the way they deal with the minorities sometimes, not always, but sometimes is not good.
Mm-hmm.
I can see them wanting to fight that. And then so they have a cause that they care about, and then you get some clever individual, white, all lives matter. It's almost like an insult, like they're not listening. They're minimizing their plight. Okay. Now, so, I kind of think, well, it's only all lives matter, but it's almost like you're minimizing what the other person is saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way. And it's kind of like you're poking the bear. It's like, I don't like your ideology, so I'm going to poke you with my ideology, instead of cooperating. It's, it's almost like they're retaliating, but it's probably not the best way, However, I don't believe in censorship, and if you want to wear an all white lives matter T-shirt, go for it. I think you should be able to wear it.
Yeah.
I think the motives behind wearing it are kind of they're not as honorable. They're not thinking, well, all lives matter. I think they're trying to they're dissing the Black Lives Matter to a certain degree, or they're minimizing, And I can see the Black Lives Matter making a point. Also, the MRAs, men's rights activists or movement. Okay.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, okay, there was this, I don't know what university it happened, but there's this, they call her Big Red. She's this raging feminist who's just
I've seen her
swearing at these MRA guys want to hold a workshop or something at these universities. They want to hold a class, right? To educate people about, men are getting screwed over in divorce court, family law, and all that.
Yeah.
She is just flipping right out. She won't even listen to them. She's just like, like her values or her causes are totally threatened. So she just, so I'm afraid what's going to happen is everybody's going to get threatened. There's probably a little merit to every outrage. There's a little bit of merit, but come on, let's be reasonable,
Being reasonable.
Yeah. And
it's a tall order.
Yeah. And people are just, oh no, it's my point of view and I'm right, you're wrong. And,
Yeah.
Like I was thinking of getting a Pepe the Frog t-shirt. Okay, I don't know if anybody knows about the Pepe the Frog meme.
Explain it.
Okay, so I don't know about this cartoon, but I think this guy came out with an internet cartoon or game, and the character's name was Pepe, and he was this green frog,
Uh-huh.
and he became a meme. But then a bunch of white supremacist groups started using that meme.
Uh-huh.
So now Pepe the Frog was, I guess, appropriated by the white supremacists. And so people get outraged when you see somebody wearing a Pepe the Frog shirt, right?
Right.
They're thinking, oh, it's out, like this person is being a racist.
Right.
Maybe, maybe not. But Pepe the Frog belongs to this nation in this cartoon called Kekistan. And, and then there's also a meme, Kek Lives Matter, meaning people in Kekistan's lives matter. Okay. Now, my motivation, I was thinking of getting a Pepe the Frog shirt, and my motivations was I just want to piss people off. I just want to annoy them and start a reaction, because I like to shit disturb once in a while. I like to poke the bear myself, And then I thought, really, do you want to do that? Do you want to like stir stuff up, and sometimes it's just not worth stirring stuff up. Just why stir the pot,
Yeah.
Even though it's probably innocent. And even Jordan Peterson, he got a bit of a tongue lashing from Wendy Mesley. This is funny. This is poetic justice. Wendy Mesley, for those of you who don't know, is a journalist on, I believe, CBC.
Yeah.
And there was an interview with her and Jordan Peterson, and he did a lot of talks, did lots of traveling, and he was photographed with a bunch of guys holding a Pepe the Frog flag or shirt or something.
I think that was in New Zealand or something like that. I think on one of his tours.
She was trying to chastise him, saying, "Why are you wearing this? Aren't you?" And he says, "It's just a cartoon frog." I do so many interviews, like, I don't know, I go in a picture and there's somebody holding a picture of a frog, like,
Yeah.
So people are just like flipping out over the most stupid symbols,
And yeah, there's an interesting side story.
Okay.
To the frog. Jordan Peterson, a couple of years back, when he's right into symbols in that, right? He's kind of like Joseph Campbell that way, in my opinion. And I forget why, but he got the attention of Jonathan Pajot, who was French Canadian Orthodox Christian wood carver, all deep into symbology. And they had a quick discussion online on the topic of Pepe the Frog.
Okay.
And to do with like how this, according to Jonathan, and I think there's something to it. Symbols rise, culturally speaking, and they have a deeper meaning. And so there's something to do with the rise of the symbol of the frog. I can't remember the details, but I thought it was really fascinating that they were having a discussion based on that. Jordan, who he is, and Jonathan Pajot, who he is, the two had never met, and they said they just had a quick video and they put it online. You can find it on YouTube. And then Jonathan Pajot developed a huge following as a result of that discussion. And I follow him too. He has a monthly Q&A. It's like an hour to 2 hours long. It's quite fascinating. He gets deep into symbology, and I love that stuff. And I think there's more to it than meets the eye. So I think next week when we have one of these, we should talk about, I'm going to make a note because I'm going to forget, symbology. This is something I really like. Pepe the Frog. I think there was another topic that came up. Which again, red pill.
Oh yeah, a red pill.
I got a lot to say about that. And the MRA, the men's rights activists, but we can save that for another day. There's much more to be said about all of that stuff. Endless conversations, but the thing is, you got to be able to have a conversation. And if you're loaded with an ideology, and especially if you're loaded with a push to power, a will to power, and underneath it you have I don't know what to call it. What is their motive? When one person wants to bully, and it's a form of bullying.
Yeah.
You know, you can almost use the grade school playground recess yard as a metaphor for society in many ways. There's this hierarchy that sort of develops, and if your hierarchy is based on an ideology, it's a hierarchy nevertheless, even though they use really nice words like equality, diversity, you know, fairness for all, and doesn't work. Doesn't work. And on a large scale, I think the Soviet Union was a good example of that, and the communist China. I mean, you just got to look at the statistics alone, the amount of people that died. You know, there's no variation the way I see it, and what we're talking about, and what drives the outrage culture. There's no right way to do it. It's just wrong. It's the way I see it. Because it's a bunch of children and who are. You ever seen the movie Chronicle?
No.
It's a good movie, by the way. It's a little hidden gem. It's about these three guys. They're in high school and they find this hole in the ground in the forest, and they go under and they walk into the hole, and it's a tunnel, and then there's this big glowing orb, and poof, it just something happens, and then the next day they develop superpowers, and they eventually are able to lift themselves up and fly. They can literally fly. It's really quite well done. And one boy, he's got a shitty home life where his dad's an alcoholic. His dad has an addiction to painkillers, and he's a firefighter. He can't work. He's on disability. So you kind of feel for the guy. And his mom is dying. She has like terminal cancer, so she's dying at home. And the kid's in a shitty way. He's just in a shitty way, and he ends up using these powers. You have to watch the movie. It's quite good. But my point being this, I think, again, it's a meta example of why somebody in a schoolyard or in any social setting is a bully, and why this guy did what he did. I'm not going to, no spoiler alerts, but you know that bullies, they're not really bullies. They've just been trained to be that way through the things that have influenced them. And they're really scared underneath it. If you confront them, they're scared. You know, they back down. And this drive for outrage and manipulation through outrage for power is really at its very root. I think a lot of that. Do I make any sense here at all?
No, you do. Okay. Lots of food for thought.
Okay, well, let's talk about it next week.
All right.
If we do this again. This is only our second one.
Yeah.
I made notes. We'll talk about symbology, Pepe the Frog, and Red Pill.
I'll bring up, I won't bring it up because I don't want lawsuits, but I'll talk to you about it later.
All right. I'm going to pause right now.